Today, we are diving deep into a really wild federal lawsuit. You've got a private citizen taking on members of the Florida judiciary. We're going to go straight to the complaint itself to break down what happens when someone claims the very system meant to protect us is the one targeting them. I mean, that's the big question here, right? At the heart of this case is the allegation that judicial officials used their incredible power not just to oversee a case, but to actively go after a citizen who wasn't even formally involved. It's a story that really makes you think about power, accountability, and where the line for judicial authority is drawn. Okay, so first things first, let's set the stage. To really get what's going on here, we need to know who the key players are and how they all got mixed up in this to begin with. All right, so on one side, you have the plaintiff, a man named Rusty Miller. The lawsuit describes him as just a regular citizen who was helping out Kelly Lynch, who was the defendant in a criminal case. And on the other side, well, that's where you find the defendants in this federal lawsuit. The big names are Circuit Court Judge Diego Madrigal III, who was the judge in the Lynch case, and Assistant State Attorney Richard Walsh, who was the prosecutor. Now, if you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. Rusty Miller was a non-party. That's so important. He had no official role in that original criminal case. He wasn't the one on trial. He wasn't a lawyer. He was just a guy on the sidelines. And as you're about to see, that non-party status is the entire backbone of his federal complaint. So you might be wondering, if Miller was just a supporter, how did he end up as the main character in his own federal case? Well, the lawsuit claims that after he did a few things, he suddenly became the direct target of what it calls an unprecedented retaliatory campaign. So what set this all off? The complaint points to a very specific moment. It says Miller helped file text messages into the public court record. And these weren't just any text messages. The lawsuit claims they documented misconduct and suppression of exculpatory evidence. And then it draws a straight line, saying, quote, this protected activity directly triggered the retaliatory campaign against Miller. And wow, that alleged campaign sounds intense. The complaint lists some really shocking actions it says the judge took. Things like accusing Miller of a crime right from the bench, doing an unauthorized search of his sealed criminal history, and then talking about that private information in public. The suit even claims the judge pressured the original defendant, Kelly Lynch, to publicly cut ties with Miller, basically linking her sentence to her association with him. Now, among all of these serious claims, the lawsuit highlights one particular moment in court as its smoking gun. It's an event it says was a knowing and willful misapplication of the law, and it's all right there in the court transcript. So it starts with the prosecutor, ASA Walsh. He's on the record in a different hearing, and he's explaining the correct way to handle the charge in the Lynch case. He says the jury found she did not use but possessed with intent, and he clearly states that means it should be a less severe third-degree felony, an F3. He even says that's what we did in the other case, Lynch. And it seems like the judge in that hearing totally gets it. The transcript shows the judge replying, okay, gotcha. Yeah, it becomes F3. So you have it right there on the record. The prosecution and the court are seemingly on the exact same page about the correct lower-level felony. But this is where the story takes a huge turn. The complaint alleges that just hours after that conversation, Judge Madrigal sentenced Kelly Lynch under the much, much more severe first-degree felony, or F1 provision. We're talking about a difference that could mean years in prison. The lawsuit frames this as a direct, deliberate contradiction, the smoking gun that proves willful misconduct. The sentencing itself was a massive issue, but it wasn't the only part of the Lynch case that this federal lawsuit is challenging. It also takes aim at her probation conditions, arguing they basically smashed the wall between church and state. So here's what the complaint says happened. Lynch was ordered into a residential program that the lawsuit calls explicitly Christian and Christ-centered. It claims the program had mandatory Bible study, mandatory chapel, the whole 9 yards. And here's the kicker. The suit alleges the court offered zero secular or non-religious alternatives. On top of that, it says the facility limited her ability to talk to people on the outside, including her legal advocates, which of course directly affected Miller's ability to help her. So you've got the alleged retaliation, the puzzling sentencing, the probation conditions. What do you do with all that? Well, Rusty Miller did something very few citizens ever do. He filed a federal lawsuit against the judge and other state officials. And in doing so, he decided to take on one of the biggest legal shields in the entire justice system. And this is it, the real deal. The first page of the federal complaint. Miller is asking the court for a few key things: to officially declare that what the officials did was unconstitutional, to issue an injunction to make them stop, and to award him money for the damages he says he suffered.
Now, suing a judge is, well, it's incredibly difficult. And that's because of a legal concept called judicial immunity. Basically, it's a doctrine that protects judges from being sued for their official judicial acts, even if they get something wrong. The whole idea is to let judges make rulings without being afraid of getting sued all the time. It's a very, very high wall to climb over.
So how does this lawsuit even try to get around that massive wall? It makes a really specific argument. It claims that immunity shouldn't apply here because the things the judge allegedly did to Miller, searching his records, making public accusations, those weren't judicial acts. They were more like administrative or investigative actions. And since Miller wasn't a party to the case, the lawsuit argues the judge was acting in the clear absence of all jurisdiction over him. So what's the angle here? What does Miller want the federal court to do? Well, he wants a declaration that these actions were unconstitutional and an injunction to stop them. He's asking for his name and that sealed info to be scrubbed from the state court records. He's also seeking damages. And this part is pretty significant. He wants a broader order that would require secular options for anyone sentenced to a court-ordered program like this in the future. And that really brings us to the big lingering question this case leaves us with. It forces us to try and balance two fundamental principles. On one hand, you need judges to be independent, to be free from intimidation. But on the other hand, you have to have some way to hold power accountable when it allegedly goes way over the line. This lawsuit is now in the hands of the federal courts, and whatever they decide, it's sure to be an important chapter in that ongoing debate.